What up, everyone? This is your host, JOLSID, and today we'll be interviewing Crystal Rose. Crystal Rose is the CEO and founder of a company called SenseChat. SenseChat is a blockchain based company that focuses on users' privacy and how you can send cryptocurrency from one person to another person. So it's really cool technology, amazing platform. Without wasting any time, let's do this. So welcome everyone. I am talking to Crystal Rose. She's the CEO of company SenseChat. And Crystal, tell us about what is SenseChat and what does it mean make sense? Because I love that whole thing, makesense.com, and I love the movement. So tell us more about your journey, where you guys are right now, and what's the platform all about?
Absolutely. So SenseChat is decentralized messaging.
Mhm.
It's really, really basic. It's peer-to-peer messaging. So what we think is nonsense is having a third party controlling your
Mhm.
connection to someone else, spying on your data, storing your data, having that center intermediary. And what we think makes sense is having a true peer-to-peer connection. And so really what we're working on doing is the same thing that Bitcoin did for digital money, turning it into a cash transaction, peer-to-peer transaction. We want to do the same thing for your text messages, turn your messaging into a real conversation like we're having, now. I mean, this is recorded, but if we were, sitting in person, one-on-one, there's no one listening and no one spying and no one storing anything. So we just believe that peer-to-peer messaging makes more sense.
Totally makes sense. And why decentralized? Like how does it work? So nobody's storing this information. So let's say if you and I were to have this video chat on SenseChat, right? Where exactly that data is going? So
the core thing is that everything happens on your local device. The reason decentralization is really about utilization of the nodes on a blockchain network to facilitate connection. So we're using the EOS blockchain, and we use accounts so that the accounts are like your wallet address. Basically, we don't need to know the person's email, phone number, which means we don't need to store it. So the other thing is, in order to create a connection on any messenger, usually you have to have your contact list. You have to have those things stored. And then all of the messages are stored on another server. For video chat especially, there's no reason to store it at all. It needs to be ephemeral. It's there's no reason, even if it's encrypted, to have it stored, because that later on it could be analyzed. Someone has the encryption keys as well. So while encryption is great during transmission, we really don't need to store data that's encrypted either. Kind of like Telegram, secret chats on Telegram are encrypted. I think WhatsApp removed their encryption policy a while ago, which is why their CEO left Facebook. But even if you're encrypted, you still have to have keys. And if those keys belong to the platform could get subpoenaed by the government. I mean, there's a million ways in which that data could still be breached. So the idea is just really simply, let's have ephemeral conversations. And inside of that chat stream, we let you transact crypto as well. So we have our coin Sense, and then we have EOS, so that you can send a crypto transaction.
Interesting. So Sense is more of a utility token, I'm guessing, right?
It is. We originally had a product that was centralized messaging, and it was a chatbot network, the largest chatbot network with text messages as well. You could talk interoperably between Facebook, Skype, Slack, all of the different services. So if you were on Telegram and I were on Facebook, we could chat interoperably without knowing the other person's platform. And that was our product, Sensei. Sensei had called Sensei coins. And we had about 20 million of them when we decided to start building a decentralized version and start building a cryptocurrency around that. So we made Sensei coins into Sense. We had about 30 million. We did the transition. And so today the token is used primarily to facilitate the chat. So the big idea really is, if everyone was a node on the network, like if you think about, are you familiar with mesh networking?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
A lot of the chats.
I'm a blockchain nerd, so like you can go.
So like the chats that have come out that rely on mesh, they use proximity, like they use a Bluetooth connection. So let's say you want to mesh network, you don't have to have data like FireChat. The only problem with that is that it extends only so far. The cool thing about the blockchain is you have nodes that are literally global, literally everywhere. This is why we like EOS, because there's a node in every single place. And then if we light up a different node, your phone, we have nodes everywhere. So now potentially we can run this network without having to worry about, anything in between. It's just the users that are running it. So eventually, if we could mine the token just by virtue of chatting, that makes it an extra utility.
Interesting. So people who don't know, you initially started out with ERC20 token, which is on Ethereum protocol, and now your team has transitioned the overall token structure to EOS 21 on EOS. So why did that transition took place? And help us understand, like, just people who don't know the difference between EOS and Ethereum, why Adapt would move to EOS if they are on Ethereum.
Most people are familiar with Ethereum being the main blockchain that everyone raised an ICO on.
Yes.
It was because it's Ethereum. Well, Ethereum itself was an ICO. It was a $19 million ICO in 2015, and the moment that smart contracts or logic became part of the blockchain, different new tokens were spun out. The most famous second, or there were several, but the most famous ICO next after that most people would recognize before Ethereum actually is the DAO, and the DAO is that $168 million massive ICO, and it taught us a lot of lessons. I think that was the pivotal moment when people started realizing you can create a token, you can do this offering. It's a really great mechanism for crowdfunding, essentially. And so all of a sudden, we saw all these different tokens popping up, and thousands of them. Yeah. But was not anticipated, I think, was that during this process, I know Vitalik and the team did outwardly say they were going to launch an update, launch Casper, but what has happened is Ethereum remained on proof of work, meaning it remained really slow. And so the application software is really difficult to get to scale. If you want fast transactions, if you want no fees on the network, that's the other big problem, gas. So I think we all saw the network's instability when CryptoKitties had a peak.
Yes.
Because CryptoKitties, they kind of choked the network. That was and that was at a time when even, this is just last year. This is when people would say, hey, as a disclaimer on their website, if you're trying to buy into our ICO, CryptoKitties is currently really active. It might take 24 hours. And that's a big deal, because if you're sending $10,000, you want that transaction to settle really fast. Absolutely. So now you're paying a lot more gas, which means everybody else's transactions get deprioritized, which means, it's just this compounding effect. Now, I love Ethereum for everything it's done for the ecosystem. I think it's still by far one of the most successful chains, but there definitely needs to be a move from proof of work into another model. And so we decided, because we did build a product on Ethereum called Crypto DM. Okay. And that's crypto direct message, and basically you just pay crypto to get to the top of somebody's inbox in Telegram, because all the crypto people are on Telegram, and it's really bulky. We've got a lot of stuff going on. So we were like, hey, let's just throw crypto straight into this messenger. We already know how to build interoperable messengers, and we threw Sense token in there too. And then we also built it with EOS. So we use Scatter. So we have MetaMask on Ethereum. We use Scatter on EOS, and we realized it's a great ability to be able to send a memo or be able to send something with no fees at all.
Was that the initial plan when you guys started your Sense chat to transition to EOS, or that's something that just transpired as you saw some of the limitations of Ethereum?
We really wanted to just fundamentally connect people together is one of our core goals. If you read the original white paper, though, we changed our model pretty heavily. So we thought that the primary important thing was the user's data, and we saw the biggest value being in data. So the original white paper for Sensei talks about chat, but inside of that chat, we were reading and scanning and understanding the data. We thought, what if we just let the user take their data? So, for instance, Facebook Messenger, right, takes all of your data. scans it with AI, and it helps them retarget you for ads on Facebook.
They make so much money, and users really don't get anything.
Tons. The users get nothing, and you're not really getting a huge benefit from that. But you should be really aware that your private messages are getting scanned. Same thing with WhatsApp, and you'll get retargeted for an ad on Instagram if you had a conversation on Facebook. So we started to realize that there's so much money. Everybody knows this. There's so much money in data. And there's so much money because the advertisers pay it. But what we thought was not good was that there's a publisher in the middle taking all of that money, and that the user doesn't get any of it. So the advertiser pays the publisher displays the ads, publisher is the data broker. Basically, they exploit your privacy for money. And so we were like, well, what if we could just connect the two parties? So like the cool thing about peer-to-peer is it's like advertiser, user connect. So we tried that. So Nike was one of our first tests with the original Sense token. We really had to struggle with building out application software that was functional for all the reasons we just talked about with Ethereum. But the goal, we started it with Reddit and GitHub. So if you look at the app, they're still there on app.makesense.com. There you can basically log into GitHub. It looks at all your data. It gives you a score. And it then relays that to whoever wants to buy your data. And so we wanted to give you the control of, can I sell my data to an advertiser directly? We learned a really, really valuable lesson, which is kind of like earn.com does this. If you want to open an email, you get $1, like do something like join a Telegram group, you get $1 of crypto. People really don't like to have conversations with advertisers for $1. They think their data is more valuable. And so, we learned that instead of $100 like a month on Facebook, which is what people think they should be earning, it's more like $4 or to $12 if you're very active. So it's not a lot of money, and it's not really worth us taking all that in and understanding everything about your private life just so that you can earn a couple dollars. So in the end, we were like, well, what if there was a messenger with no data? Because everybody's trying to get secure and encrypted. We're on Signal, which I actually think is a great platform, and it's
open source, and nobody's profiting off that.
Yeah. So, but there's still data, and we're like, what if there was just no data? Let's just remove the data. Let's go the opposite direction. So there's been a huge pivot. We did try a lot of different things. We hit limitations with applications, but once we hit on the big idea, which I think is the direct messenger, just basic, simple peer-to-peer messaging with a wallet, then we realized we needed scalable free software, because there's no way that we can cover the cost of transactions on a network. And that's when we discovered that EOS would be the right way to go. And now our app is in test flight, testnet, and ready to go.
Nice.
What we've done is we have referral links, and I'm super happy. Anybody that's in this space that wants to deeply, participate and give us feedback, I'm really happy to get them on board early as well. But for that list, for the first for the 2,000 people that referred the most people, they're going to get 1,000 tokens just for giving us the referrals, and then also for giving us feedback. So you just have to provide a little feedback, and then we're giving some of the Sense tokens.
That's really cool. So just to understand this, like, it's basically you are creating a solution that's not keeping users' data. You're not trying to profit off people's data. You truly want people to have transparent communication with each other, and nobody's really in between profiting off of information and data. But how does blockchain apply to?
Yeah, so for us, the identity is the important part of this equation.
Yeah.
We also wanted to figure out, how do you create a user account without holding any of their information? I don't want to know their identity at all. We don't want a relational database that sits there and holds their identity and ties you to these conversations. So, in a world, especially where our phone numbers are the number one most vulnerable that we have in terms of hacking, how do we get you into a messenger without using your phone number? And that's another really basic question, but it's something that no one's done. So the blockchain helps us to establish an account where it's held in a distributed fashion. Like an EOS account is not held on our server. It's held in the node network. We could do the same with Ethereum. It's just that we don't want transaction fees right now, but it could be any potential wallet. And I think, eventually being blockchain agnostic is really important. But for now, the accounts on EOS are amazing because they're, simple, human readable 12-character words. So you have actual account handles. And then the way that the keys are managed is cool too, because you can actually have these designated accounts, sub-accounts that you turn on and off permission. So eventually, as people start to understand more about the way EOS works, we liked that a lot because it's all in your control. So that was the first step is, how do we create a connection where that nobody owns? Like, we don't want anyone to own the contacts. It's basically decentralized contacts.
Absolutely.
And the worked the best for that. And then the second thing was, what if we looked at conversation like a transaction? So, in a buy-sell sort of two-sided marketplace where we can send each other today crypto, tomorrow some digital assets. So let's say you have, tickets from Ticketmaster that are on the blockchain. You want to send them in a chat. And just like Craigslist, you kind of want to be anonymous. You're like, I'm just buying this thing. It's super transactional. I'm going to, connect to the person. And so the blockchain's there for that too. And so we wanted to start with crypto. And I'm really excited if we have digital assets like CryptoKitties or something else where you can literally in the chat streams just transact these things together.
That would be super cool.
It's interesting where the ecosystem is because what we're looking at is we need something to build that interoperability. And that's kind of our old game in the centralized messaging world. And we need that on the blockchain. But I'm looking at projects like Polkadot and other things that are doing interchain communication.
Okay.
I really do think that it would be something that everybody wants. We'll put a decentralized exchange on the back, maybe is another option. We're looking at some DEXs. We're looking at DAX as well, some digital asset exchanges. We want to pull them in and we just want to be the communication tool. We're excited about getting everybody connected and with no other intentions. There's no bad intentions about monetizing on a person. So for that, there's another paradigm shift, which is we're spending money and resources on the network to facilitate this. So how about the user spends a little bit to facilitate it? So how much would a person spend to have a very private video chat? Maybe, in 1 cent or 2 cents or, in cents.
Yeah.
And that's another thought is, and I think we're seeing this with like IPFS storage. How much do we actually have to pay to store things on the blockchain? Well, we don't store a single chat, nor we ever will on the blockchain. I think that's not where it needs to be. But the memos and things and the transactions are there naturally just as a part of the transaction. But the idea is, the entire internet was built for free, but these products actually do use resources. So what we want to do is be completely transparent. Here's how much RAM we're using. Here's how much the servers are costing. And if you can contribute a tiny bit into the network as you're using resources, we don't have to monetize your data because the whole thing is lifting up these very expensive infrastructure bills. Yes. That's why the original platforms were like, oh man, let's use banner ads. How do we pay for our servers? We want to do a free blog, but how do we pay for our servers? Banner ads, and that's where it kind of all started.
I like the monetization because that's the next thing I was about to ask. I was like, what's the business model, right? Because you're not monetizing off data. So I like that. So in essence, what people will be doing, so if I want to have a private conversation, I'll just pay for what I'm using, or can I do a monthly plan? How would that go?
For now, yeah, it's per chat for now, and right now we're not charging. We're going to just run the network and gather all the data that we need about what the costs are associated, what's the average times, and kind of give people options. We have 4 different models around this, but they are actually more about neutralizing the network instead of profiting off of the network. So if the person could, let's say you keep your chat running and you're running a node on the network, and so you're earning cents because you're running a node, and then you decide that you want to have a private, video chat, and then you pay a little bit of cents. These are all very tiny microtransactions, but because they're going back and forth, hopefully, just like Steam It, we can create a really good ecosystem where you don't lose out, economically. But if you choose that you would rather only pay, like, on a lot of these massive networks, it's usually somewhere between 2 to 20% of the total network that will uplift everybody else.
Agreed.
So ideally, people don't feel like they're spending. And some people are actually earning like a ton. And we want that. We want people to be able to earn just by having a chat.
Okay. How would that work? Explain. How would they earn, like, just by having a chat?
That's what we're working out right now. Maybe you can buy some digital assets or have, sell some crypto kitties, pimp out your crypto kitties. I think really if we can perfect the model around running nodes, we can let people effectively mine the token. And I use the word mining really loosely because I don't want to associate it with like the old school like proof of work. Yeah. Like, love Bitcoin, got my Bitcoin, but also mining to me is more about just what work you put in to get out a resource, and that could be in any capacity, right? That could be in any action on the network. So I think Steam It could be considered mining in a way by going around and commenting and liking posts,
contributing. Yeah.
Right. So it's basically like, how can we create contributions and create a reward system for those contributions? So we're working on that. And this is, it's fun to be at the early stages of something. And it's also, to me, it's important to be really honest about where you are in the process, because we have a huge roadmap and we have tons of aspirational ideas. But just like we found failures within the Ethereum ecosystem for ourselves, at least, we might run into roadblocks. So what we're also excited about is just people who really want to jump in and participate and play and kind of get involved.
No, I really like that, like how you guys are taking privacy to the next level. But at the same time, if we can build a business around it that's ethical and that's socially transparent, why not?
That's exactly it. And it's not about being extractive. I think you can have a healthy, thriving business without having to exploit whatever resources you have for maximum profit. So that, the broken part of the existing business models today are the extremes of profit. And this is where the value chain breaks down. And this goes to everything, even clothing, and that's that's an easiest example, because you have sweatshops, right? And you have at the bottom of the value chain, you have the people who are making the product losing out the most, because there's such a big spread in the profit, and that's really unfair. So for me, like, fair trade and supply chain is a really important thing. Those are the companies that personally I like to back. I do some angel investing, so if I see anyone that is working on transparent and fair supply chain, I'm a huge fan of that, because it's the only way to be able to have a global economy.
I absolutely agree with you.
And so I think when people are like, well, what's your business model? How are you guys going to make money? It's like, well, that's actually a secondary thought. And it's not that I want the company to not make money, but I don't want the company to lose money, which is the old model of the internet. The internet is give everything for free up front, raise tons of money from the VCs, sustain for years with these hefty infrastructure bills. And we learned a very valuable lesson on infrastructure. We were kind of spending 6 figures a month on our infrastructure, and that was
Sensei.
And that was primarily because of text messaging costs when we were running our networks on text, and being able to facilitate tens of millions of conversations. It's across networks. We're making all these connections. So now there's this better efficiency in the way that we can do our nodes and our network. We're removing centralized services. So eventually. What I think is also cool is that the blockchain and these nodes are on bare metal servers sort of all over the world, right? And they're not centralized to like one data center. It's not like everybody's building on AWS and we're all relying on the same thing. So it's just a different model, and it's kind of how can we create sustainability that then benefits every single person. And I think the unique thing about the blockchain that is different for business models. So if you think about just like fundamental, underlying, bare basic, how we can get to a DAO, like how do we get to a decentralized, autonomous organization, right? Well, the way to do that is you align the incentives of the parties. So in the old model, the incentives are the shareholders put in the bulk of the money, so they want to extract the money. So the shareholders, are looking for profit. You have the employees or the people who are building, and those are the people that may or may not own shares, most likely not, but they're working for money coming in to the system. Like they want to, their interest is in basically interest is in building a great product. But there's like maybe they don't have the same interest if they don't have shares. And then there's the user, and the user just wants the lowest price, or the user just wants the best, the most service. But the interests become misaligned though. And if every user and every builder was also shareholders, so let's say that you have to buy your iPhone with Apple stock. That means you have to hold the stock. That means you have to actually put it back in the system. The incentives start to become aligned. Everybody has the right model of incentives, and that's sort of where I see the future business model going.
We need to go back to that Japanese harmony model, which is ikigai, right? We need to go back to that, where everybody involved have this proper harmony of vested interests, as opposed to one party always taking other party, like everyone thinking about their interests. We should be thinking about the common vested interest and achieving that, I would say, state of harmony.
Yeah, I agree completely. Ikigai is really important. You'll see a slide of mine that I've used for a while of Ikigai that's been in my talks. And Ikigai has 4 things though. It's like for a person, for an individual, it's about your life purpose, and it's what you are really good at and what you can bring to the world, like what the world needs, right? And then there's this bubble that says what gets you paid. And that's actually one that we kind of have to rethink a little bit. So it's like, how do we go for the things that we love and we're good at and the world needs first? Like that's it, like the passion. Like, so there's actually four bubbles on Ikigai today. Yeah. It's like what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs. And that 4th bubble is what gets you paid. So I actually removed that one, because usually people kind of start there. They start with that. And that's the same thing with companies. Like, okay, you have this idea, but like, how do we make money? And so that's been the interesting transition through the tech world, is the venture capital model up front made it so that you could remove what gets you money. But then they realized, oh my God, we have to pay back $100 million.
Yeah.
We can't keep raising more rounds. So, but in the decentralized world, that changes, because if the users put in a little bit, but they're getting value because you're putting in something, and that's where tokens are amazing.
Well, Crystal, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for talking about Sense and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, happy to join you from wherever I am in the world, and and thank you so much for inviting me to chat and have a conversation.